What is going on there, ditchers? Happy Friday. If it's Friday where you are, happy Friday. It's Friday here and it's a good day. So wanted to hop on here, you guys. So yesterday I made a post basically just throwing out some information regarding digestion and how it can literally influence the uptake of the energy from the foods that you are eating or drinking or however else you're consuming them. I had a lot of input and a lot of questions of like, tell me more. And so I'm gonna hop on here real quick, go through a few things. There are other contributing factors in this. I think given the scenario, I think we might, depending on the potential want of it, might turn this into a little bit of a masterclass, kind of help you guys understand a little bit more of the mechanisms that go into the uptake of the things that you actually eat. Okay, so we're talking about digestion, you guys. Essentially, what we're talking about is the things in which you consume and the process in which you obstruct the nutrients and essentially the energy from the cells of whatever they are eating, so you can in turn use that for your own nourishment. All right, so essentially that's what we're talking about. Now, the digestion process starts even before you eat. Okay, so even when you start to think about food, you start to actually salivate, right? Like you actually start to create saliva and everything else in your mouth, and that is where the start of the breakdown of the food essentially starts. And so one of the biggest things we try to really get all the clients we work with is actually eating real food that is required for you to chew. All right. Now that's the part that when we're actually chewing and we're actually, having to break down the food in the process in our mouth, that's where that process starts. And then it goes down our esophagus and then into our stomach. After we swallow, we produce stomach acid that then moves on and just starts to create digestive enzymes. And then it moves on from there, and where we start to churn and move the food and kind of break it down. And then it moves into essentially the small intestine, where we start to mobilize and take up and distract the cells and everything else from the food and the nutrients. And then it gets distributed throughout our body and gets kind of basically turned from all the different hormones and carried and everything else that the process goes through. So, and then from there, it goes further down the chain where it's even further metabolized and then is discarded from our bodies as waste. Okay, so even from that, the process of digestion is actually very complex. Okay, the components and all the kind of hands in the pot of what gets interacted on as it's going through that process. There's a lot of procedures that go into this, right? And so how those procedures are interacting massively is going to affect the amount of energy that you're obstructing from this food. Okay, so what we want to help you guys understand is, for one, this is why it's so vital that we make sure that we're incorporating whole real foods. Okay, now whole real foods are going to allow the body to absorb and identify and distinguish a lot easier. Okay, now being that the fact that digestion starts in your mouth, literally how much you chew your food is going to impact this, right? Like if I basically chew 5 bites of a piece of steak or something that I eat, and it has this big chunks and it's having to go down, it's going to affect essentially how long that's going to have to be broken down by the stomach acid, how much, the enzymes and all the other things are going to be able to literally break down that food. So, one of the things that we try to help people understand is, if you're constantly eating on the go and you're constantly eating in the car, that's going to really, really affect. I think a survey said that upwards of 33 or something percent, don't quote me on that, but essentially upwards of at least a third of us eat the majority of our meals in our car, right? Like while we're driving, while we're doing these kind of things, right? Like we talked about this a couple weeks ago regarding your hormonal response of literally what you interpret is going to affect your acid level. It's going to affect your digestion process. It's going to affect what gets broken down. It's going to affect all the other mechanisms that go into the digestive process. And that's just what I think and I interpret, let alone like how I go about eating my food. All right. right? So, that's one of the things that we really want to help understand is it's not just what you eat, but also what is in what, in what manner are you also eating in, right? Are you always on the go? Are you always in a rush? Are you always in a central state of maybe anger or anxiety or whatever? Because all those things are going to massively influence that, all right? In addition to that, you guys, is as we go through the process is also, what type of food are you consuming? Because that's also going to influence the digestive process, right? So if I consume a protein source, there's the thing called the thermic effect of food, all right? So it requires calories to burn calories, okay? So what I mean by that is if I consume 100 calories of protein, all right, as I go through the digestion process of breaking down and get the enzymes and all that stuff to go through the amino acid chain and everything else to break down and digest that protein, it actually requires me to burn energy in order to break that down. Okay, so if I have 100 calories of protein that I essentially ingest, it requires upwards of 20 to 30% of that to actually break down and absorb that. So for every 100 calories of protein that I'm taking in, I'm actually only absorbing roughly about 70 to 80 calories of that. Right? So yet again, the type of food is going to also influence the digestive process. It's going to require more work internally for me to do this. It's going this is where the thermic effect of food comes into this. And if it's a carbohydrate, it's roughly between 5 or 10%. And if it's fat, we're pretty efficient at getting the nutrients from fat. It's between 1 to 3%. With that being said, like I said, the digestive process and digestive enzymes is also going to contribute to this. And that could be independent to you, right? Like lactose, that's a digestive enzyme, right? Like we could have two people go out for a night of ice cream. One person produces lactose, the other person does not, and they're going to have two completely different experiences, not to mention the amount of energy that they're going to be able to get from that bowl of ice cream, right? Like one person might be able to uptake the vast majority of the energy from that, not have any problems, where the other person is gonna have a harder time taking in that energy. Not to mention they're gonna probably have a lot of GI distress. They're gonna probably have a lot of meetings in the restroom, right? Like they're gonna have a much more unpleasant experience around that. Not to mention they're also not gonna get as much energy from what they're consuming. All right. So this goes back to, yet again, for those that are avid calorie counters, is first off, just going through the list of that process that I listed off to begin with. You have no idea what's being actually obstructed and taken out of the nutrients from the food, right? Like I think next week we're releasing a new master class going over decoding basically food labels and the food labeling market that goes into the procedures of the things that we consume on a day-to-day basis. And even they know how to work their way around disclosing what's actually in the product and what's not, right? Like even restaurants don't have to disclose whether or not they use certain fat types of unsaturated fats and diglycerides because it's not quote unquote a fat, but what's listed on there is 300 calories, and you may actually be consuming upwards of like 500 or 600 calories based off of what they actually disclose in the information based off whether they have to or not. All right. So I feel a sneeze coming on. But it goes into, there's a lot more to this process, you guys, that always comes back to, if the biggest thing that you can do to really influence this is first off, make sure you're eating real food. All right. So I think we had a question on there is, well, how do you know whether or not you're digesting or you're not digesting or you're full or not full? And this is where it comes into a lot of the clients that we start with, you guys, is we're so disassociated from our bodies that we don't know how to necessarily understand the natural cues that we normally have, right? Like we naturally have on and off switches. We naturally have certain things that are being produced internally to flick on and off the switch. But so many of us find ourselves so disassociated with, well, I don't understand whether or not I'm hungry or full. I don't know what those mechanisms are. And so that's where if we can get in more real food where your body can identify and understand, like, this is the coding of how to take the energy energy more efficiently. This is how I, obstruct the nutrients from this thing. And it's not, a McDonald's Happy Meal that has, all different kinds of coating and different kinds of things that are going in through there. My body doesn't know how to decipher that. Not to mention, what's up, Miss Cat? Not to mention on the side of, whether or not that's actually going to cause more internal distress in my system, which is actually going to massively influence how much of the nutrients I'm able to absorb and distribute in my system. So there's many more things to this, you guys, but I wanted to just kind of disclose a couple of those things to hopefully give you some of the information to really think about when you're consuming your food. First off, make sure you're chewing it. All right. Make sure you're actually chewing it. For those that when we're eating our food, we want to make sure that it's almost like a watery substance. And I know that can almost turn disgusting in our mouth sometimes. But the more I can break things down up here, the easier it makes things down there to break down, absorb, distribute, and move along the process. Because the harder I make that on myself, the less energy I'm actually consuming. And now, in addition to that, you guys, we're working on a lot of things to help release to you guys. But literally, the size and length of your intestine, right, like of your digestive tract, will also influence how much energy that you take in. So once again, if you're counting calories till you're blue in your face, but yet again, you have no idea the length of your digestive tract, you have no idea what you're actually absorbing. And at the end of the day, you can count all day long, but if you don't know what you're actually absorbing, what's the point of counting? All right. So once again, it comes back to real foods, real nourishment, things that we can understand and incorporate. So that way you get to understand what is, first off, what's going in, what's essentially coming out. But more importantly is you get to really understand that the more real food it is, the more actual energy you're going to be able to take from that, and the more nutrients you're going to be able to take from that, and the more benefits you're going to get from that. So if you got further questions on this, you guys, would love to hear your feedback. If this kind of intrigues you enough and you would like maybe more of a in-depth process to kind of go through to get more information on these things and things that you can do to help, by all means, let me know. Would love to hear your thoughts. But other than that, you guys, I hope you're having a fantastic day. Appreciate your time, and go eat some real food. All right. Take care, y'all.